Welcome to Marriage Unmasked. Today we're talking about male friendships and how they affect and how they impact the marriage relationship. I think there's been a lot of pain for men in society for quite a while now, and there's a lot of hurt out there. And having very deep, real, raw relationships with other men is extremely impactful and extremely helpful for men in healing some of their wounds, in being able to show up as a strong and grounded man in their relationship with their wife, and to get really good advice and help and accountability from other guys.
And I think that it's really good to differentiate what friendships we're talking about here, because just like that, okay, yeah, we watch the game together and drink together.
I'm not talking about buddies here.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. It's just that there's a difference between a relationship with another man when he is speaking into your life and he's calling you up into living, as the man God sees you as. And then just like a guy you can just like vent to and, talk about work or whatever, right? There is a difference there. And we're talking about like that deeper friendship where you are really going into some of the vulnerable stuff, and you are, like Adam said, the accountability and some of that other stuff. That's what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, it is deeper. It's like, I mean, that's why a lot of people call it almost like a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Where it is a deeper relationship, and it's really helping you carry the weight of your life. It's helping you carry the weight of your marriage as well, and just to show up differently. So it's super important. And a lot of guys, I think, resist this kind of relationship. I would say men in general struggle with what I would call like a lone wolf attitude. And that's really instilled in men from a young age, is this idea that you have to at least appear strong. And to be strong means you have to be isolated somewhat, that you have to be independently strong, that you have to show up in a certain way all the time, kind of have it all together, at least on the outside, appear like you have it all together. And even if you're struggling with something, you don't share that. You don't let people into your heart. If you are having certain emotions or struggles, you disassociate from those, or you shove them down, or push them aside and just power through. You white knuckle through. And that's almost idealized in movies and things like that, where there's all these really strong guys, and like they don't rely on anybody else. They're tough. They hold their ground. They know who they are, and they go for what they want. And they don't have those deep relationships with other men. And there's some exceptions too. I mean, you can think about like military guys who have gone through difficult experience together and they bonded. That can be a very deep and very soulful relationship, that they've really gone through life together and call each other up and help each other out on those deeper things.
Well, and I'm curious about what's behind a man who feels like that's the way to be. I wonder if it has to do with this absence of masculine role models, like spiritual fathers in his life, right? Nowadays there's a lot of guys who don't have a masculine role model.
Yeah.
They don't have somebody who is speaking into their life and kind of helping them as they are, growing up, and helping them understand repentance and helping them understand forgiveness and God's love, and talking through shame. If shame comes up, talking through how to lead your wife, how to lead your family, how to have vision. Some of these things that are so key in a man's development, are those things missing? And that's why you end up showing up in this way. First of all, you don't know how to do those things, but you also don't connect with other men on that deeper level.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it has to do with how men view their masculinity and have been taught from little on, or not taught at all, about how to be a man growing up. Either they had very, very passive fathers who themselves didn't get a very good example, or were confused about what being a man was all about, or they had wounds from their father, where their father hurt them deeply or abused them or whatever. And that greatly affects a man's ability to process things, a man's ability to have these kind of deeper relationships. And those wounds really show up really strongly in the marriage too. and part of having a group like this, a group of strong brothers who really love you and are wise and work together with you in these deeper issues, part of that is what heals some of those things. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen guys who get broken open in a men's group, and they are sharing deep and vulnerable things and pain, and then they come out of that sharing with a greater sense of being grounded and like having processed some of these things now, instead of holding them all in and having this really tight grip on themselves and their heart. And many men, I know I did for many years, had that tight grip where you don't want to show anybody what's going on inside you. You think that being a man means you have to appear strong at all times and not share those things. And then also, sometimes in a marriage, you end up almost oversharing because you didn't really have a space to do that. And so then one part of the concept of now having a wife is you think that now, okay, well, I am one with this person and I can unload.
Are you speaking from experience here, honey?
I am somewhat, yes. So I have also in the past really overshared with my wife and caused a burden there, because I made her my only source of like deep, intimate friendship, my only source of raw, real relationship. And so now that really overburdened her. Now it's not to say that you shouldn't be vulnerable with your wife and you shouldn't be sharing, deep things with her. But you can't just back up a dump truck and just like unload without any kind of plan moving forward, or without any processing of this on your own, or with a brotherhood of men who are going to process that with you in a whole different way. Whereas if you just unload a lot of this emotional weight onto your wife, she is going to feel extremely burdened by that. She's going to feel like she has to fix it or coach you through it, or manage your emotions, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, as a wife, I can't be Adam's pastor, his therapist, his life coach, his
She's
his
not
mother.
designed. She's not designed to be that.
Yeah, and that when you ask your wife to step into all these roles that another man or a group of men can fill, you're asking her to step out of her femininity.
Absolutely.
And that just, as we've talked about in many podcasts, that just really can wreak havoc on your marriage. And as a man, if you are walking through so much of this alone, you're not letting those walls down, you're not confiding in a brotherhood, that really can affect your mental and emotional health. When you are with other men, and I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you really you can be vulnerable, you can open up all those things that maybe you have just locked inside, and you can let them out and bring them to the light, right? The enemy wants us to keep things in the dark. He wants us, because that's where shame just grows. I think of like mold growing. I know it's a weird illustration,
Yeah.
but you keep things in this dark, closed space, right? And then mold is just going to grow. And I feel like that's this illustration of shame just growing in this deep, dark spot. And when you bring that out and you bring it to a trusted place, a trusted brotherhood, you're bringing it to the light, right? And they can support you and bring in love and compassion. Those emotions, love and compassion, are not just for women. Men need them just as much as women. You're human. A man is a human being, and he has emotions and he has needs. And I think it is a really healthy space to bring it to other men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the lie that a lot of men believe is that they can't do that with other men, even. I've read some stories of guys who like knew each other their whole life, thought they were really pretty good friends, and knew everything about each other. And yet, and that one of them started to share really vulnerably. This is years into their relationship, where they like went to high school and everything, and admitted that they had attempted suicide several times and whatever. And then the other guy's just shocked, that he had never in all these years gotten to that level of friendship. And then the other man shared the same thing. And so here these two guys had been in such dark place, hiding that real raw stuff deep inside, and that shame that they were feeling, just like you were saying with the mold. I think it's a great illustration. and then never letting that out, never showing anybody, like keeping such a tight lid on it. And then the healing that happened between those two guys when they actually like bridged that gap, when they actually started to open up. And just like a room that's been shut down like that, you open it up to the light, and then you can deal with it. You can actually go in there and clean it and sanitize it and bring in light and love again. It is just tempting for us guys to just hide it and hold it in, and sometimes it actually takes a really painful life event or something like a divorce or like a deep failure,
and we don't want you to
like
get to that
reach,
place.
yeah, to reach like this rock bottom. Guys
Yeah.
talk about that, like get to rock bottom, and that's finally when they deal with this stuff. And so, I mean, my appeal to you, if you're listening to this and you're a man and you're feeling all these things, is to absolutely deal with it with other men before you get to that point.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to go through something so dark
Yeah.
and painful,
Yeah.
and try to rebuild from something so devastating.
Mhm.
I mean, I think of brotherhood, and the Bible even it has some great examples of like how important brotherhood is. And I think they lived in a bit of a different society back then. So men were working alongside of other men in an agricultural setting, and they were part of councils and tribes, and they were doing things together, and probably talking about a lot of this deeper stuff as men in groups. And I think we've lost a lot of that, and we need to kind of recover that in society. But you think of like David and Jonathan is a classic example where these two guys bonded so deeply and strongly, and they were so close that they shared everything with each other, and that empowered them to go out and do the things they were doing. They encouraged each other. And then Jesus, even, the Son of God, he gathered around himself 12 men to start his ministry. And he had three of them, Peter, James, and John, who were his inner circle, where he would bring them into certain things. And this is the Son of God. And he was training them up for ministry and everything, but he also gathered around himself a brotherhood of men. And they had each other to start sharing about Jesus and his work for us, and they had all this support from each other. So it's a beautiful thing. And I think that when God said it's not good for the man to be alone, it wasn't just, it was definitely for him to have a wife, but it was also part of God's design, really, to have friendship and deeper relationships with other men.
Yeah, it's definitely a gift.
So, and the Bible also talks about how iron sharpens iron, and we've talked about that numerous times in this podcast. We've talked about it between husband and wife too, but it is so important to have that in the context of like a men's group or a brotherhood, where you can be held accountable and where you can be challenged and you can grow in your relationship.
So another cool part of what can happen in a men's group is just disrupting passivity that can kind of creep into men's lives. And I don't know, to me it seems like there could be this epidemic among men nowadays, where there is just this temptation to just step into passivity more, instead of stepping into action and masculinity and their strength and vision, and really moving forward in a powerful way. It seems like a lot of times, especially what we see in couples in marriage, is a lot of times the men are just kind of taking this step back.
Yeah.
And allowing, or almost, what is the word I'm looking for? Like almost just
Abdicating.
Yeah, they're like abdicating their role, and then a woman has to step in. The wife has to step in and take over where a man is not leading, right? He's not stepping into his role, and so she has to step into that role, because someone has to lead the family, right? Someone has to lead the marriage. And so when he sinks into passivity for whatever reason, whether it's shame or I don't know if you want to speak into
Sure.
more of what leads to a man.
A lot of things can, yeah. I mean, and I think a lot of times it is shame, and it's also like a man's deep need is to feel like he's enough, or feel like he has what it takes to do the thing, whatever the thing is. And when men start to feel like they don't have what it takes, or they're not good enough, or they're not appreciated for what they're doing, they can withdraw. They can start to back out. And they'd be like, okay, well, I'm no good at this. I'm not going to do it anymore. And that's not healthy to do that. Also, part of that picture is wounds from the past and inner healing that has to happen. And because so many men just isolate themselves and bottle these things up, like we were saying, they have all this unprocessed childhood trauma or unprocessed feelings or issues or whatever, and they don't know what to do with it. And when they don't know what to do with it, it shows up in the relationship as passivity often, or it can show up as aggression. It can show up as other things too. But I think that's part of the big picture is, some of these things that are just unprocessed, and brotherhood with other men is a place to process that and to actually find some resolution
and call you out of that passivity.
Yes, and
I
also
think,
provide that.
and that passivity in a marriage really leads to this cycle of just unhealthy communication. I've talked to so many wives who are just feeling stuck in, they want to have a healthy communication with their husband, but for whatever reason, they are just stuck in these patterns of of unhealthy conflict. And those are things that you can also process with other men who are calling you up. And another part of that too is I think a man can bring to a group of men like this what he needs to confess, right? If there's things that he needs to confess or process through in his marriage, this is a safe place to do that. And the men aren't there to shame you or bring in any kind of negative reinforcement, but really to help you stay in alignment with who God says you are, really call you into like, let's get you back to this aligned place with who you really are, who God says you are.
Absolutely. And and I can talk to this a bit in my own story, because I joined a men's group, and that was one of the huge catalysts that helped me to grow and helped me to see things about myself that I had not seen or hadn't really taken stock of. I hadn't taken the time to really understand what was going on. And it's so interesting because, I mean, for years I was stuck in the passivity like that. I was stuck in this victim mindedness, and just like this shame and the negativity and these thoughts that I kept having about myself. And I was kind of in a spiral, really. I joined this men's group. They saw that in me right away. They called out kind of this victim minded energy that I was giving off, and they started to kind of dig into that with me. And I didn't really know what this was going to be like to join a men's group or anything. And it was kind of like, whoa, what is going on? Like, you're really going through some intense stuff together. But there was so much healing there. And there was no shame. It's fascinating because one of the things that we tell ourselves when we are bottling things up is that, like, we can't share this or I'm going to feel even worse or it's going to be bad. And I would share and I would feel so much relief.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't shame me. The things that you're fearing would happen, they didn't shame me. In fact, you felt so much closer to these guys. They would share their deep things. You would share your deep things. And you would start to process these things together as a group of men. And it would open your eyes to what your work is and what your struggles are.
And to see that other men are struggling too. You're not the only one.
You're not alone.
And right? Men, I mean, the cool thing about this is I could talk to Adam about stuff all the time.
And she did. She did. She would say things over and over and over again. I literally was in the men's group for like 2 weeks, and I came out of it with my head buzzing and going like, you know what? They're just telling me everything that Car's been telling you for years, and it landed in my heart. Like for whatever reason, I as a guy was like, okay, that's her story. Like I put that off. Like even though she had deep insight into me, and she was doing her best to share that, and often in a helpful way, really sharing with her heart. But I would twist that and say her agenda here is just to change me or whatever. That's her perspective, and like I would brush it off, and it didn't find a landing pad in my heart until all of a sudden I had 6 other guys saying the exact same thing my wife was saying for so many years. Now all of a sudden it was like, wow, yeah, I better really pay attention to this. And that's sad. It's sad that it took that, and that I didn't learn those things from my wife, but I think it's part of that dynamic. It's part of that where healing really can happen with a group of men easier than it does with your wife.
Yeah, I think men just hear things differently from other men than they do from their wife, especially if there's pain in the relationship. It's very easy to take that personally from your wife, whereas it's easier to be open-minded to that this is possibly, something to take a moment to reflect on when it's from another guy.
Absolutely. And then they started to provide accountability for me, really kind of hold me up to a higher version of myself. and to be checking in with me and really calling me higher as a man and showing me some deep acceptance and love that I wasn't, that I hadn't ever experienced from other men. And so it would start to fill a hole inside my soul and start to really affect me, and I would start to show up differently in my marriage. I mean, it didn't heal everything, obviously, but it was a huge catalyst for change in my relationship with Kara. It brought me hope, and it really gave me an outline and a blueprint to be like, okay, here's what I need to be doing as a man. If I want to step into being more masculine, more grounded, more present, a man who leads his family, this is the way, this is the path. And I had kind of a blueprint for that where I didn't have that before. And yeah, so it gave me hope for change and steps to do it. So it was really, really, really quite powerful. And so our encouragement in this podcast is to, if you're a man, find a group of guys like this. Like, yeah, maybe you can find a church group that goes this deep. Maybe there's a brotherhood. But I am offering my brotherhood to you as well. So it's for married men to really support each other, to really grow in their relationship with their wives through having this kind of raw, real, honest brotherhood together. And it's really to rediscover and then also recover the man that God made you to be. And that is so powerful because God made you to be this masculine, strong leadership man. It's inside of you. It's already there, but it's just been covered over by all kinds of false beliefs. It's been covered over by lies and shame and experiences that you've gone through where you've had to, or you felt the need to like hide under a shell and things like that. So what we want to do is uncover that true real man that God made you to be, and then to step more and more into that in your marriage relationship. And so we provide that kind of accountability in there, and the kind of raw, deep community and help and healing and support, like even daily support. And there's also some coursework inside of that and other things that can be very helpful. Really encourage you to check the link in the show notes. I'll put the link there for you to find out more information about that group.
And wives who are listening, because I know you are.
Yeah.
Um, to be completely honest, I actually am the one who got
Oh yeah,
him
that's true.
into his
Yes,
brotherhood
that is
group.
true. She was bringing it up a lot to me and kept bringing it up to me like you need to join this group of guys. Like this is what you need, something like this. And that actually often happens. I mean, in the group that I was in, I would say probably 75% of the guys in there were encouraged to go into the group from their wives.
Yeah, and there's a way to encourage your husband. I wouldn't necessarily say that my way was the best because I literally contacted the coach for Adam. I mean, he knew I was his wife, obviously. I wasn't trying to pretend to be Adam,
Right.
but I did contact him first. And I don't recommend doing that.
No.
But it's okay. It's okay for you to encourage your
Yes.
husband in this way. And I think a healthy way to do it is just to offer him, right, something that you found that you think would be really helpful for him, and just kind of let him make that decision. But you
Have him
can,
listen to this podcast and,
yeah,
and have some information about it.
yeah, and you can definitely encourage him. And it is a privilege as a wife to support our husbands and to encourage them in things that we see are going to benefit them. I think that's a beautiful part of our role as wives.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, if this was impactful for you at all, if you took something away from this, please share it with somebody else that needs it. Check out the link, like we mentioned, and get more information. And use this as an opportunity to discuss these things, maybe with your spouse or with another guy that needs this kind of help.